I'm a traveler. I'm an aviation buff. With over 100,000 miles flown in 2019, airplanes and airports are where I love to be. I've got a huge interest and great enthusiasm for this stuff, but it's not like that for most people flying with me on that 737-900 ER. So, I want to bring to you the travel experience of the regular guy. Today, I bring you Jeff, who, unlike me, is not an aviation buff and is considered to be an average traveler. As you can see from his footage here, he recently took a trip during the COVID-19 pandemic, and he's going to talk about his average journey during an extraordinary time. So without featuring any prominent industry leader or high-profile vlogger, let's see how the regular guy fared during his trip. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session. I'd like to introduce you today to Jeff, who is a Delta SkyMiles member, but has no status on any airline, and he flies occasionally each year. Of course, 2020, as you all know, has been a very, very difficult year for everybody, and especially for travel. So just like myself, his travel has been reduced, not only flying, but doing a lot of other things. And he only took, I believe, one trip so far this year. I was able to take a couple of trips earlier in the year, and I was able to take one trip in July of 2020, which I have two videos about my round trip. You can just check that out on my channel at any time. I've chosen Jeff to be my guest today because he's a real person. So Jeff is somebody who does not work in the industry. He doesn't have any particular knowledge or interest in aviation like me. And that is what is going to make this interview different. My goal is to really have an experience shared by the average traveler, the common traveler, someone who doesn't know that they may be on an A321, or someone who may not necessarily understand all the intricacies of the airline industry. And there's tons of interviews out there where people try to get an industry expert. They want to get somebody who knows a lot about airlines, airport operations, flight attendants, operations, the way things are served on an airplane. And yeah, Jeff has some experience as a passenger, but for those of you who don't know, I'm super interested in the airline industry. It's a passion of mine. So I really want to be able to have someone who doesn't have all this background. And we're going to talk, and we'll see what he has to say about his flights and provide some insight from basically the average traveler, the regular guy. So Jeff, did I get that right about you?
Yes, I have no knowledge at all of
All right.
anything.
Great. Well, I want to thank you very much for participating, and welcome to the interview today. So for a couple of moments, if you just want to tell us about yourself, maybe what you do, why you travel, and where have you been recently in your past travels?
Sure. As you well know, with some B-roll, I've done some very amateur videography, but I am mostly in sales, and I deal in the sales world, so there is a lot of travel involved. It's been mostly regional, so there hasn't been a lot of plane travel in recent years, but I've always been an avid vacation traveler. So I'm always looking to get on a plane. I'm looking to go somewhere new and find some new adventures. Obviously, that said, this COVID situation has made the world a lot larger, and it's become very difficult to do that. So just recently, I was able to go down to Dallas, Fort Worth. I was there for an interview for a position, and I was able to extend that trip by driving out to New Mexico, where I would fly home from Albuquerque. So that was the nature of the most recent route. I hadn't flown, I don't believe, since last autumn when I went over to London with family. So it's been quite a while.
Right. In an average year, how many trips would you say you take by air?
By air, I'd say on average, between 5 and 7 flights, not a lot.
Okay, very good. Quite different than me. I flew about 125,000 miles last year alone. So that's great just to have this insight from somebody who knows a little bit, but just doesn't do it all the time like myself. Do you particularly fly one airline, or do you vary it up?
Yeah, I typically do fly Delta. I've been a member of the Delta SkyMiles, membership since the late 90s. So I'm a pretty loyal customer. They've done right by me quite a bit. I'll fly any airline, quite frankly, and of course internationally. You fly different airlines that are available in a given country, but by and large, I look to Delta first. I've really enjoyed their service and the perks that come with the membership.
Right, same here. That's basically the only airline that I fly, or part of their Sky Team alliance if I do need to travel internationally. Basically, I did a couple of KLM flights last year. I had a connection in Amsterdam. All right, so when you book, do you normally look at fare or do you look at convenience of schedule? For myself, it's really more about schedule than anything else because I fly so often and I need to fit everything in. But if you're not flying as often, what's the most important factor for you?
Yeah, obviously, the itinerary comes into play and who you're going with. So if I'm flying solo, I'm a little more adaptable and flexible. I might look at fares more frequently. If I'm flying, for instance, we will go to Portugal every other year because of family. And that will be really contingent upon scheduling more than price in most cases. So it kind of depends on the nature of the travel.
Right. And what cabin do you normally fly in?
Almost always coach.
Okay.
Obviously I've had opportunities to be bumped up. I've never personally purchased a class higher than coach, either with miles or with money. And quite frankly, I've been very comfortable in coach by and large. I mean, I can only really point to like one flight in my whole life where I can say I was uncomfortable and it was difficult. Other
Mhm.
than that, even long hauls like Australia, New Zealand, Tahiti, Asia, I mean, like real long hauls, I've flown coach, absolutely enjoyed it.
Absolutely. And I have done so also on very long haul flights. So you mentioned that you fly Delta a lot and your trips were on Delta, correct? To Dallas and Albuquerque?
Yes, exclusively,
Okay.
yes.
Right. So Delta is doing a fantastic job with promoting safety with COVID-19, cleaning their aircrafts, and they have a message that they like to communicate to all of their flyers called the Delta Care standard. Had you heard of that prior to your flight?
Yes, through communications via email because I'm a Sky Miles member. So there's a lot of
Oh,
communication
great.
coming from Delta
Great.
during
So that
COVID.
information definitely. And is that something that really influenced? I know you do fly Delta all the time, but is that something that really made you feel more confident in choosing Delta as your carrier?
It did, but I'm not going to lie. I was pretty okay anyway with flying. I feel like a lot of it is personal responsibility at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are things beyond our control. So the Delta statement came as comfort, but it was sort of more bolstering the comfort that I already had.
Mhm.
I was prepared to wear a face mask the duration of the flight while I was in the airport. I wore a face shield on top of the face mask as well. So again, I think a lot of it is real old fashioned personal responsibility as much as anything.
Absolutely, yes, it's very important, and you are relying, of course, on other passengers too to make sure they're doing the same when you're especially when you're on an airplane or anywhere today. Ensuring that you're around people that are actually taking care of themselves.
Well,
Also,
I would say, if I may, that something that Delta implemented, and I don't know if other airlines do it or not, but not selling the middle seats during COVID, that to me was important because, like you said, social distancing, some will, some won't. If you're not allowed to sit next to someone, you're automatically somewhat distanced. And that did make a bit of a difference for me. I found that to be a comfort.
yes, and they've extended that to early next year, so that's definitely a benefit for flying on Delta. Um, Other than the emails that you received from Delta, did you do any other research? For example, I'm a freak about this, so I basically looked up everything I could find on the internet. Did you do any of that, or did you just go with the emails and maybe go to delta.com to?
Yeah, I really didn't do any other independent research other than what you see on the news every other day now. It's easy to get news. You hear about numbers, you hear about with regard to COVID specifically, how transmission is occurring. We
Right.
really still don't know for sure what's going on.
Mhm.
So again, personal responsibility. I wash my hands frequently. I love the fact that they provide, Purell and other sanitizers at almost every 10th step you take. I
Mhm.
take advantage of that. Again, it's not rocket science. You
Right.
just do the very best you can.
Right. Let's talk about the flight itself. So you flew from New York City to Dallas. They're actually, so from what I know, Delta is operating that route with a brand new Airbus A220. Do you know if you were on that aircraft type?
Yes, a little bird made that known to me just prior to boarding that I would be on a new bird. So I was very excited about that.
So I consider you to be very, very fortunate because I myself have not flown yet on the A220. It just never worked out with any of the routes that I take. It's a great new airplane, and it sounds like you didn't know about it till that particular moment when you got yeah. So
That's correct.
So one big difference between the average traveler and myself, I would have just been in seventh heaven if I was on the Airbus A220. Did you enjoy the aircraft? Was it a good airplane to fly on?
Absolutely. Again, just the general tenor of the situation is a little bit different right now. I think people are a little bit cautious. It's a little bit quiet, but as far as the airplane itself, looked brand new. And of course, I think that was the airline, right, with that has the window in the loo. Is
Yes.
that yeah? So
Laboratory. Yep.
again, the bird that told me about that made me go to the back and check that out. And I got to admit, that was really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of felt like you were in maybe a next generation of touch. It's kind of neat.
Brand new. Good. Well, one thing I do want to focus on is the airport experience because that's where you have the most amount of touch points, contact with people. When you're on the airplane, it's pretty much straightforward. The great thing about being on the airplane is that you're sitting most of the time. You're not breathing heavily. You're not rushing to a gate. Let's talk about the airport experience. You flew out of LaGuardia, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And LaGuardia's got two terminals. We've got Terminal C and Terminal D. Did you know which terminal to go to when you arrived at the airport?
By default, we go to D, and I believe we went to D. We checked in there, and then we actually had to take a shuttle on the grounds, like on the airport side, the tarmac, whatever it might be, over to C.
Okay.
So that's a new situation, I think, because they had to take the bridge down at LaGuardia while they're doing construction.
Yeah, when I flew in July, the bridge was still there, and they took it down, I believe, September 1st, and you flew slightly after that period during the month of September 2020. Bridge is no longer there, so they do have a shuttle bus that brings you from one person to another. Did you check a bag at the?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, bag was checked.
You should have known that you could have checked into your terminal. Delta does
Now,
provide that on the app. So
hence,
now, a lot of people.
status.
A lot of people do go to the first D first because it's closer when you're approaching on the roadway. But Delta does operate out of D and C, and of course, it's going to completely change when they get their new terminal. And they've already started to build. I don't know if you got an opportunity to see that in the D gates. There's a new G concourse on the far west side of the airport. Were you able to take that?
We did see the
East side,
general construction. Yeah, I didn't know what it was going to be, but clearly it's
some brand new gates on the west side of the airport that Delta's operating out of now. So you checked a bag?
I did.
Okay. And what was the process like? I'm assuming you put your mask on the moment you got out of the vehicle.
Correct.
Were there a lot of people in the terminal?
No, on the New York side, it was very sparse. Yeah, the agents were extremely helpful. They kind of made you feel a little bit like a child in a good way. Like you got a lot of parents looking out for you, being very helpful, asking questions. But otherwise, the procedure was the same.
Okay.
It was just a lot faster. No wait.
No wait. And when you did see people, were people compliant when it came to social distancing?
Yes, by and large, everybody was masked. I assume that you have to be. But everybody had face masks. Honestly, especially in New York, there was social distancing because there weren't enough people. I mean, there weren't lines. Wasn't waiting. I'm TSA check, whatever that's called.
Pre-check,
Pre-check, right? So there was just no wait anywhere. So it was a little hard to tell. But I would say, like at the gates themselves, when you're getting ready to board, by and large, people took their time a little bit more than they normally would. I'm not going to say everyone was measuring 6 feet between each other. They weren't. Yeah. But yeah, again, there was so few people.
At the moment.
Yeah.
So you dropped your bag, went right over to TSA, no wait, of course. What was the TSA process like? Did you have to remove your mask at all in order to be identified at the pre-check lane?
Yeah, just a very brief pull down, basically. Just that, you're done.
Okay. And were they wearing gloves, do you remember at all? Or face shields?
I don't remember any of the agents wearing face shields. I remember masks only. Actually, I only remember spotting one other person, or maybe two, that in the duration of my trip that actually had face shields.
Mhm.
other than myself. There
Yourself.
was a
Okay.
woman, a passenger that was wearing one. I don't remember anybody else wearing one.
Okay. And the X-ray screening, how did that go?
Um, I'm trying to remember because I think I was a little expedited. I was traveling with someone who was in not pre-check,
Okay.
and I think that it took them a little bit longer. I didn't really see the procedure, but I don't think it was anything different than normal. I kept the shoes on, kept the belt
Yeah.
on.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Good. So normal experience and
yeah,
no crowds, basically.
none.
All right.
Not
And
on the New York side.
right. Yeah, New York really has not fully recovered, even though the COVID-19 cases are a lot lower today in New York City. The number of flights is just really never picked up. And LaGuardia, unfortunately, is really not being used as a hub. It's more of a point-to-point destination O&D type of service. Hopefully that picks up soon. So social distancing is pretty easy in New York City right now at the airports. Did you notice the stores closed on the air side once you got through security? And did you purchase anything? Did you eat anything? How did that go for you?
Yeah, it did. Most facilities were closed. You found one or two that were still operational. I can't remember, quite frankly, if there were any dine-in opportunities in some of those places that were open, but I didn't take advantage of those. So
Yeah.
I think it was mostly grab and go for the one or two that were still open.
Did you need to remove your mask to eat anything at any point while you're in the airport?
I we well, yes, because I can't eat through the mask. At least they haven't developed that one yet. But I didn't really eat in that particular time.
Ah,
But yeah, would have obviously.
right. Okay, great. And then the boarding process. So you took the shuttle over from the D terminal to the C terminal, which you were unaware of. How was that? Did you feel safe during that experience? Was it a large bus? Was it just one guy bringing back people in a vehicle? What was
Yeah, it
that?
was kind of a standard shuttle type bus. Pardon. I don't know, maybe up to 25 passengers or something like that. I wasn't aware, I wasn't expecting to do that. So I was a little taken aback. It felt a little bit like being in a foreign airport or like an island or somewhere smaller with fewer facilities, but I
Right.
kind of enjoyed it. Being a traveler, it's a different experience. And the fact that, again, there are so few people traveling, pretty much everything is convenient. People are going out of their way to help you, to make you feel comfortable. So even if they have to change up the situation, it's fine. I
Right.
enjoyed it.
Right. So you're at the gate now, out of the C terminal. Did you notice that some of the C terminal has actually been demolished already?
I can't say that I did. I mean, it's such a sight to look at, construction wise, all the new structures going
There's a
up,
lot going on there. Yeah.
stuff going down. It's just,
Yeah.
it's
The
a mess.
concourse on the C terminal with the lower ceilings, which is on the eastern side, is completely gone. And they don't really need the capacity right now because there's hardly any flights. But there's going to be huge changes at LaGuardia. It's going to be
Hmm.
amazing. All right, the boarding process. I'm going to leave this one open to you. As most of my viewers know, today you're boarding from the rear forward. Um, you mentioned, people weren't exactly counting 6 feet, but did you feel safe and comfortable? Did people remain seated? Did they all crowd around the gate area? On my last flight, I was in the first class cabin, and I made sure I actually boarded very last. I was in row one. I wanted to stay as far away from all people, even though they did say that first class and diamond medallions can board at any time during the boarding process. I didn't feel comfortable with people passing by me. So, what was it like? And when you boarded, were there people that actually passed by you, or were the seats behind you already filled?
Yeah, the seats behind me were already filled. I sat towards middle plane most of the flights. And there was no issue with people trying to get in front of you or crisscrossing. I mean, it was very orderly. They were very clear about how they wanted people to board. I don't even remember them mentioning that priority people could board first, but I'm sure they did. Um,
I've got the ear for that, so I'm sure they did.
yeah, you were looking for it, but
Right.
yeah, there were no. It was very orderly, like I said, and there were so few people. It really didn't make much of a difference. It was a little bit different story coming back to New York, but leaving, not at all.
Okay. And then on the airplane, did they hand out a Purell wipe?
Yes,
Okay.
upon boarding, they all gave you the little packet.
Great.
Um, yeah, and you'll get to the other service questions, I'm sure.
Yep. Safety video after pushback has been changed to talk about masking, social distancing. What did you think about that?
Yeah, again, just some new addendums and such, more repetition. I guess that's really what this is all about, is telling people the same thing over and over enough where it becomes second nature.
Right.
Hopefully for a lot of us, it has. I did notice with, for instance, the sanitizers that they gave you, there were some of us, wiping down our seat area. As soon as we got to our seat, I brought some wipes of my own. So, you wipe down the seatbelt buckles, and you wipe down the tray table and everything that you might touch in the course of the flight. I did see other people doing that, so I was just assuming most people were being responsible.
Yeah, and it was great to have nobody next to you at all. So
It
yeah.
always is, right? But
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
especially,
Yeah, it always is. Definitely. I've actually changed my seats a couple of times right before boarding because I'm looking at the app on my phone saying, "Oh, that seat is empty. I'm going to go over there so I have nobody next to me." So, but
right,
especially
right.
important, of course, during these very difficult times. So you taxied out to the runway. I'm sure you got off in like a minute, basically, without
No way.
yeah, out to off time was just no delays at all in the air, and on your way to DFW, Dallas Fort Worth, American Airlines country, but on a Delta flight on a brand new A220. Um, Service, they usually do service not too long after takeoff.
Mhm.
I'm curious to find out from you. Like I said, my last trip during the pandemic was in the first class cabin, and we were actually given the flight fuel boxes, which is normally for sale in the main cabin. So that's in addition to the normal Delta cookies or the nuts or anything you want to drink. I actually didn't eat it at all because I didn't want to take my mask off. So I just saved it for later. I wiped it down. What was the service like in the main cabin experience on Delta?
Again, pretty consistent with what you've experienced in the past, except that obviously they're masked and gloved, and that everything is prepackaged. So they hand you a bag, a plastic bag,
Yeah.
containing a water, containing some salty crackers, and I think a package of cookies or something like that. I think there were 3 items,
Right.
but that was standard. Everybody got that, and that was it.
And did you eat anything?
I did on one leg. I just had the salty crackers. That was all.
Okay. So, what do you think about this? My thought is that when they're serving food, I think that if they have enough time, serve food individually to different people in staggered areas so that everyone's not taking their mask off at the same time. Is
Right.
that an out of this world idea, or do you think that would have been feasible? Dallas is a lengthy flight from LaGuardia. What do you think about that? I'm just
Yeah, of
curious.
course.
The thought that I
Well,
have
again,
on this
right. I mean, it's
topic.
just any corners you can cut that might make a little bit of a difference. Why not? It's
Yeah,
not. It's yeah.
people tend to get the food and eat it right away. So if they're, first they're giving it to row one, then row two, everyone's in close proximity. My thought is just, stagger, person here, person there. It's more work for the flight attendant. It's going to keep them a little bit more busy throughout the flight itself. But I just think it's a better way to contain the fact that, people keep their masks on while they're around other people. Masks really work best when you have 100% use of masks. Of course, it's better. Wearing a mask is better than that. But when you've got the mask off, there's a little bit more of a risk, of course. The flight attendants, of course, had their masks on throughout the
Yeah.
entire flight. Right.
Yeah, but again, I would say that at least on my behalf, the concern more is with your fellow passenger as far as safety and cleanliness than it is with the airline and their crew. I
Right.
mean, I was telling some people who were worried that I was going to be flying during COVID,
Yeah.
and I don't know, rationally speaking, I kind of felt like it might have been one of the more safe places to be if you're taking your own responsibility to heart.
Were you aware of the fact how the air is recirculated extremely often on these airplanes?
Delta was very clear about communicating that. They were also very clear about their filtration system and that it was equivalent to that which the large hospitals utilize. So
Right.
the captain came on and basically told us as much, said, you guys, we welcome you aboard and understand you're in one of the safest, cleanest places you can be right now. And I
Great.
believed them because they gave you evidence. Besides the filtration,
Yeah.
supposedly they're cleaning every cabin between every flight significantly, and they gave me no reason to doubt that. Everybody was doing their job.
Yeah, no, I'll admit I actually did have quite a bit of trepidation the day of my departure. I almost wanted to chicken out and say, no, I can't do this. But their messages of the constant cleaning of aircraft, the fact that between flights, they are sanitizing aircraft. So the dwell time for the airplane on the ground is a lot longer nowadays as opposed to what it was in the past, because they have the and they take advantage of the fact that they're sitting there, they can bring people in, there's all these disinfectants, they wipe down the surfaces, and that really, really helped me gain my confidence when I was on the airplane.
Yeah, and I agree. I think you have to employ a little common sense again, where you have such fewer numbers of flights, of people, of everything. You're getting a better class service than for your money than you probably will again. I mean, there were so many aspects of the travel that were next to luxurious, that the attention and care that you get, so you don't have you have to wear a mask. Some people, that's a big deal. But other than that, I mean, you have more space, more time, you're on time, better than it has been since I can remember.
Right.
So a lot of it's perspective.
Absolutely. Let's talk about, so the long flight, we'll talk about getting to your destination. You obviously descended into DFW and you got to the airport. What was the deplaning process like? Again, I want to know because, like I said, in my previous flights during COVID, I sat in the first row. First off, I honestly didn't even turn my head the other direction because I didn't want to be facing anybody facing me. I know they make the announcements to let people deplane, ensuring that the row in front of you is 6 feet ahead before you even get up out of your seat. Was that protocol followed?
By and large, again, if we're talking the New York to DFW leg, there were so few people, it's very difficult to really gauge that. But no, nobody was jumping up like they usually do,
So what about your other flights that were more crowded?
Sorry?
What about your other flights that were more crowded?
Yeah, I mean, it was still orderly. People were still fine, but some people seemed a little anxious to get off the plane. So they jumped a little bit, but nobody was pushing or crowding or getting right on you. Mm-hmm. You took your time. And I took that opportunity to stay in my seat. There was no rush to get off the plane.
Right. Exactly.
There usually isn't. So let everybody else go, do their thing, and then you leave alone.
Yeah. You did have to check a bag, so you had to claim the bag, of course, in DFW. Yeah. I know in New York there's a lot of social distancing signs. Were there signs in Dallas or markers on the ground, as you go through the airport to baggage claim and at baggage claim to make sure that you're separated from others?
Sure. You see those little circles, 6 foot distancing, like everywhere you go now. I mean, everywhere. And again, if there were more people, then it would be easier to gauge if people were taking advantage of that, but it wasn't necessary. There just aren't enough.
So it's kind of a national protocol, I see. All right. Anything else interesting about that flight from New York to Dallas that you want to share with us?
Not particularly. I think Delta just did a great job keeping you informed and communicating and feeling pretty good about things. I mean, I would say that since there were so few people, I mean, I don't know, maybe 30 people on the flight. I'm not really sure.
Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to ask you. 30 people on an E220, not a lot of people, yeah.
I'd guess, 30, 35. That being the case, I just feel like they did a good job making everybody feel very comfortable and safe. Mm-hmm. And I think the people that do fly right now are most likely either business travelers, people that are used to flying, expect to fly and know the protocols.
Yeah.
So they're going to be more comfortable with the situation, I would assume.
Yeah. Good. One more question I wanted to ask you about the flight. Did you use the in-flight entertainment system at all, the screen in front of you?
I actually did not. I was using the Delta app on my cell phone quite a bit. I did not purchase the Wi-Fi. I just had the free onboard. So I was just trying to see where I might be able to go with my miles if I decide to cash them in on Delta and hook up the majority of the time.
Yeah, I do that all the time also. Same thing, I just use the Delta app during my flight and basically track my flight using the Wi-Fi in the airplane. Didn't really want to touch the screen in front of me, to be honest with you, even though I knew that it was cleaned.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Well, yeah, I wiped it down thoroughly with a Purell, so I didn't really have to touch it either, but
yeah,
take the precaution.
All right, so that's that flight. We're not going to talk about your stay or anything there because this is a call focusing on Delta. Your return flight was from Albuquerque, ABQ. I've never been to that airport. So New Mexico was a state where the COVID numbers are actually quite low. It's one of the states where New York does not have it on the quarantine list. So you actually can freely go to New Mexico and then come to New York, and you don't have to quarantine. What was the airport experience like in Albuquerque?
Yeah, again, it's wide open, so there's a lot of space in that airport. It's just big sky, and when you get in, it's no different. You enter the Great Hall with the original airplane hoisted from the ceiling,
Oh, nice.
uh, and it's a beautiful airport. A lot of historic, airline material there. They have cases and cases, glass cases of the entire history of airlines and like all the different kinds of planes that have been flown
Oh,
since
great.
the early 1900s. So it was really a spectacle, but again, very few people. I mean,
So with the lower number of people, I'm assuming social distancing was pretty easy at ABQ.
yep. Also very easy.
And even at an airport like Albuquerque, same types of signs, distance
Yep.
markers. Mhm.
Very consistent. I would expect that in any airport, in any Delta terminal.
Absolutely, yes. Good. So I don't think we should focus too much on this flight. It sounds like it's pretty straightforward. That flight was going to where?
The Albuquerque flight went back to LaGuardia
Okay, but did you connect
through
anywhere?
Atlanta. So I
Through
connected.
Atlanta. Okay, Atlanta. Yeah, because you can't. I know you can't fly from Albuquerque
Right.
to LaGuardia. Atlanta, the hub, the mothership, the realm, Delta.
We didn't want to call it the mothership because we'd just been to Roswell, New Mexico.
Oh,
So
okay.
tempting fate in 2020. But other than that, yeah.
So what was it like? From what I'm seeing, most Delta flights are getting routed through ATL. So there are still quite a few flights operating out of that airport. They're using it to go to all of their destinations. There's got to be more people in Atlanta than the other airports, correct?
Yeah, the word I would ascribe to ATL right now is normalcy. So that's what you would more
Really?
expect. Yeah. Obviously, it's not as busy as it normally would be, but relative to LaGuardia, ABQ, yeah, it was bustling. Lots of people, lots of traffic.
So would it be safe to say that the only thing that would make things different was noticing people wearing masks in Atlanta?
I mean, the numbers, I'm sure, like I said, were slightly down, but yeah, obviously the masking is the big key difference. And there's still major closures with facilities in the terminals in the airport. Almost everything was closed. I believe there was a Subway restaurant was open, a TGI Fridays restaurant was open, and maybe one of the newsstands. But I think everything else, by and large, was still closed.
Did you eat?
Did I eat? I did. I actually had brought my own food from outside and ate it before I went through security at ABQ. I did not eat anything at ATL.
Okay, very good. And did you have to change terminals in Atlanta?
We did, but it was the next terminal from where we deplaned. So we were going to T Lake Thomas, which
Or
was
Tango?
walkable. Sorry, Tango. Sorry, forgot. So yeah, I went. We had to go to Tango, which was just the next one over, which is easy to get to. Interestingly, I was hoping to catch an earlier connection.
Mhm.
From ABQ, there's only one flight back to LaGuardia that day, with two potential connections out of ATL.
I see. Yep, yep, got it.
And the early connection was only about a 32-minute layover. So
Yeah,
I didn't purchase that understanding that ATL is so big, it's going to be tough.
right.
And as it turns out, we arrived at our gate while that original connection was just about finished boarding.
Yeah.
So
Did you walk to your connecting terminal, or
yeah,
did you take the train?
we walked.
Okay. So I'm not going to ask you what safety was like on the train since you didn't take it. And walking is pretty straightforward. It's a nice little tunnel that they've got down there between.
Unless you go backwards, then it's not straightforward at all.
Exactly. Very good. So look, so how crowded was the flight from from Albuquerque to Atlanta?
Significantly busier. Obviously, still no middle seats, but we were a little surprised that certainly in first class, because there are only, I believe, 2 and 2 on each
Yeah.
side. Those seats were pretty much filled.
Yeah.
And I would say maybe 50% more filled than the flight over to DTW
Yeah.
or DFW.
And it was
Yeah.
probably a larger aircraft also. I don't think they're using
Yeah,
it
I believe.
on that route.
But I don't believe there was a window in the loo.
Yeah, so it definitely was not an Airbus A220. I can tell you that. Yeah, it's the only one out there. Great. So going to LaGuardia, and how was that experience boarding? Popular route, Atlanta LaGuardia. It's a huge business route. That's actually the number one route on Delta right now. Out of LaGuardia, were there a lot of people? Were they socially distanced? Same questions as before, but applying it to this particular trip.
Yeah, when I said normalcy, I think that applies broadly. People were still masked, of course. Um, I would say that there was some distancing because people weren't on top of one another like usual online. You wouldn't have the huge crowds congregating in like a semicircle waiting for their, to be called. You didn't have that. But that said, you did not have, it didn't seem to be that people were like counting feet and that they were really giving themselves a ton of room between each other.
Mhm. Did the
They were
gate
masked, they were, at arm's length, but they weren't, spread out along the whole corridor or anything.
right? Did the gate agents make any announcements about social distancing while boarding also, or did they just call rear to forward?
They called rear to forward. I don't remember any particular announcements about distancing, man.
Okay. Great. And then the flight itself, again, we're not going to get into all the details unless there's anything particularly that you want, in particular, that you wanted to bring out or mention about your Atlanta to LaGuardia flight.
Just that it was a little bumpy, but it was fun. But other than that, the COVID-related situation was consistent. Again, I appreciate Delta because they're so consistent. You know what to expect, and
Definitely.
again, common sense comes into it. These places need whatever business they can get right
Right.
now.
Right.
They're not going to take chances and cut corners
Right.
with safety at the chance that somebody gets sick and everything has to close down. So
Right.
again, I think people understood that were traveling. The temperament of the travelers seemed very, very also consistent, relaxed. There wasn't any panic. There weren't people rushing to do this or that. People that were flying understand the situation, and Delta did a great job managing that.
Absolutely. I can say the same for my recent Delta flights also. Let's just talk about New York City. So it is quite different when you land in New York City these days because of the health form requirement. So when I landed at LaGuardia, there was a person who approached me at the gate saying, "Do you have your health forms ready?" And I said, "They didn't give anything out on the airplane. Is there something is there something I need to do?" So they just handed me a health form. It's actually on a table at the airport. Were there health forms? Was there someone greeting you at the gate? Were they on tables? How did that process go? And what did you do for this particular process, which is completely new?
Yeah, let me back up a little bit. So one of the reasons we actually went to New Mexico from Dallas is because the traveler that was coming with me is a government employee, and they're very careful about following these COVID regs. Obviously, Texas is a quarantine state. So if he had spent more than 24 hours in Texas, he would be mandated likely to quarantine here for 2 weeks. That wasn't going to happen. He couldn't allow that to happen. So we went out to New Mexico. Under 24 hours, you got over the border. At that point, you're allowed to stay as long as you want in a non-quarantine state, right?
Mhm.
So that being said, my traveling companion was very careful and very clear about what was going to be required. And he was wondering about the contact tracing procedure and such.
Yeah.
And we were prepared. We were prepared for the paperwork, for the book report, for the whole thing. I got to be honest. Delta made it extremely simple, very, very convenient. We were on the plane, at the gate. The gate agent called at least 4 or 5 times prior to boarding and told people, you're going to have to either come up and get this piece of paper and fill it out, or you can go to the website, you can use your smartphone and go directly to a page that you can digitally fill out.
This is in Atlanta.
This is in Atlanta.
Okay.
So I chose that option, and it couldn't have been easier. I
Did
went
you
up to the
use
gate
your phone?
attendant.
Yeah.
You do the scan with your camera on the barcode
Okay.
that they had on the paper,
Wow.
and it brought you directly to the page. It was only, I don't know, maybe a 10 or 12 question questionnaire.
Hmm.
You submit it. It tells you to take a photo, a screenshot of the page, the final page that gives you a check mark saying that based on your itinerary and criteria, you're clear.
Really?
That's all you had to do. So as you save that in your camera roll, didn't have to touch any papers, nothing.
Huh.
Upon arrival
Yeah.
at LaGuardia, going to the baggage claim. Like you said, there were tables set up to the left, I guess, of the contact tracers where they were collecting the paperwork from people. And there was just one gentleman in a, like a pedestal, like as you go to baggage.
Yeah.
I literally just had to walk by, show him my screenshot
Really?
with the check mark, and that was it. He
Really?
took a look at it, saw the check mark. I was free, no questions, no delays, nothing.
Yeah, I guess when I flew back in July, it was so novel. So that option I don't think was available at that point. So it was just fill out a piece of paper. And of course, when I landed, I wanted to get out of the airport as quickly as possible, away from everybody. So I wrote all my answers down and handed it to somebody and then left at that particular time. So that person was actually at the gate. So I understand at some airports, and I believe at JFK, they're actually stationing a person at the exit to the secure area so they don't miss anybody, because obviously everyone needs to pass through one particular point. So that's someone at your gate. When you got to the point where there's usually a security guard there when you go into the public area, there was no one there, I'm assuming, with health forms or anything like that?
Correct.
Okay.
I didn't see any, yeah.
Right. And you checked a bag.
Yes.
In Albuquerque, which I'm assuming was a socially distant and very safe bag check. When you claimed your bag at LaGuardia, a lot of people there. Any issues? I know your plane had more people on it this time. Did a lot of people check bags, or?
Yeah, I would say it's an even proportion that you would normally expect. It's just the numbers are so low, there's less congestion. I mean, it's New York, let's be honest. Even in this situation, if 80% of usual travelers were still going, I'm sure there would be lines and it would be hard to social distance, common sense. But in this scenario, not at all. I would actually highly recommend traveling if you can go somewhere responsibly that you really want to see.
Right.
I would go now.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely with less people. Just, back in February of this year, you just have to fight to get a seat at the airport, and you're just right on top of everybody. Things have changed just drastically. So, and the airlines, of course, are looking for the business, as much as they can get. The industry is being hit very, very difficult right now. Well, that's absolutely fantastic, Jeff. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain your journey to me and my viewers. It's a different point of view. You took different flights, different aircraft type, different class of service than my vlog. If anybody out there has not seen my videos, please go to my page, click on the videos section. I've got 2 flights that I chronicled in extreme detail from New York City to LaGuardia Airport, which is my favorite and home airport, connecting in Minneapolis, so a different airport, with a final destination of Minot, North Dakota, and the return trip also in a separate video. Got lots of great footage there. And the footage that you're seeing in this particular video was taken 100% by Jeff himself. He's a videographer, so he has a lot of B-roll, a lot of aspects of the airport that you can see, the airplanes, so that really puts everything into perspective, just to give that visual effect. Jeff, is there anything else that you'd like to say today before we conclude the interview?
No, I just want to, I guess, quickly thank you. It's extremely interesting, the period we're in. We know it won't last forever. So it's an experience that we'll remember, and we're making the best of it. So hopefully we can take some of these lessons learned and apply them moving forward.
Absolutely. Great interview, Jeff. Thank you so much for your time. And to all my viewers out there, please do like this video and take the time to subscribe to my channel so that you're made aware of other videos. And don't forget to click the little bell button so you actually get an alert when I post a new video right in your YouTube page. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Jeff. And I hope everybody out there stays safe. Bye now.
Bye.